I know what some of you are thinking after hearing this gospel, where Jesus seems to condemn all divorce and then suddenly jumps over into the purity of children. It's like two separate gospels. For a lot of people, the reality of divorce is something they already know too well, along with its consequences and its pain. How could Jesus condone such a thing? For many people, especially women, the only thing that kept a wife from being a statistic of domestic violence and murder was to flee. So often, religion does not help this desperate situation. My own Aunt Helen Scowron was married to a drunken man so violent he nearly killed her twice in the early 40s. She finally escaped by running out of the house with only the clothes on her back and sought a divorce. And what was Helen's reward for her act of bravery? She was a devout Catholic, but the Catholic Church declared her to be an unrepentant sinner and excommunicated her. Wow! At the very moment she needed the nourishment of this table, the nourishment of God's love and God's acceptance at the Lord's Supper, she was banned. So how is it possible that Jesus said her treatment was right? The fact is, he didn't. Now, once again, the priests of the temple were trying to trip Jesus up to say something against the belief of the day that Moses' law approved of divorce. You know, make a note of this. We're dealing with belief. Actually, what Jesus was doing, that he did so well, was taking up the role of the powerless and turning it upside down. Jesus was an advocate for women many times in his life. Think about all the stories we've told here. And he certainly did not think that a woman should risk death because of the way men, including husbands, discounted their worth as people. Think back to the moment that Jesus kept a mob of men from stoning a woman to death caught in adultery. And he proclaimed at that time, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." The temple priests who surrounded him, always scholars of the law, knew that what it took for a man to do was to go to his rabbi and request a divorce. That's what's known in Judaism as a get, G-E-T. Moses granted a get for marital infidelity. That was a serious thing, and not for much else. The truth was, only a man could get a divorce. A woman could never get a divorce. She wasn't allowed to. A woman was powerless. But in the laxer days of Hillel rabbis, it was much easier. For instance, a man who may have had a wife and there was a sweet, cute, younger thing nearby, simply went to his rabbi and said that my wife keeps burning the roasts. My wife keeps burning the roasts. Any kind of dereliction of household duties, and she could find herself out in the street. To be a woman without a husband and no source of money was pretty much a death sentence. She would die in the streets of starvation or in a hovel somewhere. So what was Jesus doing here that was telling them the irrevocable concept of marriage covenant was every bit as restricted for men as for women? It's the first time, if you think about this, we see someone sticking up for powerless women in the Bible, sticking up for the powerless. So it's not surprising in this strange gospel that we understand now what Jesus is doing when he calls next the other group of powerless people in the first century Judaic world, the children. The kingdom of heaven belongs to those who are like children, not conniving like the priests. Totally dependent on men whose beliefs were determined whether they would live or die, those children only had Jesus. Well, here comes that word again. We've just said it a couple times, belief. Belief. And we often associate it with the word with having it be some kind of positive religious belief. However, realize this. Those temple priests believed they were right. The husband who dumps his wife for a newer model believed he was right too. And with this Sunday and the ones to come, I'm opening up for you a look at what our journey can be to become wise in the name of God. I'm using a work by Dr. Francis Collins, who is a fellow Yaley, whose degree in medicine did great things, including he found the cure for sickle cell anemia and many other things, and the human genome. But his work in science did a strange thing for him. It took him from being a young man steeped in atheism into someone who found markers for the existence of God in everything he worked on. By breaking down the barrier between faith and science, he discovered, as he says, God can be worshiped in a cathedral or a laboratory. If you see God as the creator of the universe in all its amazing complicity, diversity, and awesome beauty, then science, which is of course a means of exploring nature, also becomes a means of exploring God's creative abilities. And so for me as a scientist who is also a religious believer, research activities that look like science can also be thought of as opportunities for worship. Living as we do these days in a world where everyone believes that his beliefs are absolutely right, and in fact, anybody who disagrees with those beliefs is not only wrong, but possibly evil, we need to understand how we acquire our beliefs and what forces shape them. In his book that I'm using for this Sunday series, which I invite you to get, it's called The Road to Wisdom on Truth, Science, Faith, and Trust. Collins explores what belief is and how it is deeply engraved in our hearts. What we believe with all our hearts creates what we call a cognitive bias toward processing the information that we're constantly getting every day. Consider people, and these days I know you know them, consider people you know right now who truly believe any of the lies and untruths that are being pumped out for political gain. We need to understand this in order to get closer to any kind of objective truth. Collins finds particularly useful a metaphor, and I'd like you to imagine this, a metaphor for our beliefs and the effects they have on us. He has the spider's web, which you know goes like this, in and in. And if you envision such a web, we're going to put belief strands on that web that are most critical near the center where the spider would stay most of the time. Passionate beliefs are at the core, would be things like this, and you have your own, things that are most dear to you. A passionate belief near the center would be, my wife or husband loves me. The resurrection is true. I'm a good driver. All people of every race and religion deserve respect. Farther out on the spider web are things that are meaningful but somewhat less critical to you. Rush hour traffic in Danbury is awful. Collins used his outer web, and he used this thread as an example. My cat loves me. He added that he's fully aware that this is difficult to prove because cats are cats. So, but hopefully you are beginning to consider which beliefs of yours shape the way you live and treat others. Consider the threads of belief near the center of that first-century husband who believes, my rights are more important than those of any lowly woman. Our beliefs also evolve during our lives. They're never static, they change. In contrast, consider the belief that my Aunt Helen had to develop for herself and learn for herself in order to make that leap away from her abuser. And that belief would have been, I am worthy to live, and I don't deserve to live in fear. The big question next time when we meet, because we will continue this series, is how do our beliefs get formed? Where does this information come from? And who do we trust enough to listen to? Even more critical, how do we talk to and listen to people who don't share our beliefs? At a dangerous and anxiety-ridden time like this, how can we become a wiser bunch of followers of Jesus who can help heal the world? In the meantime, till next week, think about who were the people in your life who taught you right from wrong and how. We'll pick it up again next week. Amen. I send you forth into a world where contrasting and conflicting beliefs become a challenge. But as we work our way through this series, I hope you walk away with a sense of how to reach wisdom, how to discern what you're hearing, make your own decisions, but also make your own decisions with the light of God. May God bless you and keep you all this week. May God make God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you, now and forevermore. Amen.